And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Tuesday, November 12th. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate, get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat to put out any thought or comment you want to see me acknowledge during the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss today. So we're going to start off the show. We're going to recap last night's game between the Dolphins and the Rams. Dolphins coming out with the win, much needed victory, 23-15. So we'll get into the specifics of that in just a second. And then we'll recap a bunch of the games I didn't get to yesterday. We'll talk about the Chiefs and their win over the Broncos. We'll get into the Jets and their loss to the Cardinals as they drop to 3-7 now. We'll talk about the Giants and their loss in Germany against the Panthers. And then we will get into the Saints and their win over the Falcons, a surprise victory there. So with that being said, let's get into the first topic, which is talking about last night's game between the Rams and the Dolphins. So I thought this game was going to be high scoring. I thought the Rams were going to win this one, but the Dolphins actually get the win here. And I was definitely surprised with how the game unfolded. I thought both defenses played really well last night, especially the Dolphins defense. I did not expect them to play as well as they did. They were putting pressure on Matthew Stafford. They were getting after him. And the Rams, they were doing a good job at protecting Matthew Stafford, during this winning streak that they were having. And, I just thought with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp being back, this streak was going to continue, but it didn't happen. And, the Dolphins, on their first drive, they went right down the field and scored. And I thought, oh boy, is this going to continue? And, the Rams defense, to give them credit, they did step up and slow them down. But the Dolphins defense, I think, was the bigger story, or the biggest story coming out of this game, because the Rams did not score a touchdown last night. They kicked 5 field goals. And the Rams didn't do themselves any favors. There were costly penalties and mistakes that costed them. You had Kyren Williams fumbling. Matthew Stafford had a lot of passes batted at the line. You had Calais Campbell batting passes at the line, and he was interviewed after the game. Good to see that he's still playing. But, yeah, and the Rams didn't do themselves any favors. You had a field goal by Cardi later in the game where, he makes it, but then there was a penalty on the play that pushed them back, and then that resulted in them missing the field goal. I want to see where that was. It was in the third quarter. So they make it, but there was a false start. So it turns a 52-yarder into a 57-yarder, and Cardi ends up missing the 57-yarder, and then the Dolphins end up scoring a touchdown off of that. But we'll kind of go through the drive summary quickly. So, yeah, the Dolphins went 5 plays, 70 yards to open up the game, 3 minutes. They went down the field. You had 19 yards to Jalen Waddle, then another 36 yards to Jalen Waddle. That was really all he did the entire night. I thought he was going to have a big game, but that was basically it. It was just that first drive. And then you had Washington on the end around score a touchdown. Malik Washington, that was his first career touchdown. I thought it was Tyreek Hill on the end around, but it was not. He did end up scoring, and I ended up losing one of my matchups by 3 points. But I did go 4-1 in fantasy this week. So Malik Washington scores his first career touchdown, and that was from 18 yards out. So that made it 7-0. And the Rams immediately go 3-and-out. First play from scrimmage, they try to set up a screen to Kyren Williams, and he ends up losing 10 yards on the play. But there was a lot of punts. And then, like I said, Matthew Stafford had an interception, and he was trying to hit DeMarcus Robinson, but it got picked off. And the Dolphins turned that into 3 points. This was a Jason Sanders 50-yard field goal. So it was 10-0 after the first quarter. Then the Rams ended up punting, and this was a crazy sequence. So Tua ends up throwing a pick, and then immediately after that, Kyren Williams fumbles. And then after that, the Dolphins end up fumbling. Tua gets sacked, loses the ball, and the Rams get it back. They end up turning that into 3 points. So it was 10-3. Dolphins then punted on their next possession, and then the Rams were able to get 3 points before the end of the first half, and it was 10-6. And then, like I said, I brought up, the Rams going to kick another field goal, which would have made it 10-9, but there was that false start, and that led to, the re-kick that ended up being a miss by Cardi. And then the Dolphins turned that into a touchdown. A big play, 33-yard reception by Jonnu Smith, took it down to the 1-yard line. I was hoping he would score, and then I was hoping that the Dolphins would just run it, but they spread it out, and Tua found Tyreek Hill for a 1-yard touchdown, and that was the difference in one of my matchups that I ended up losing. Tyreek Hill was relatively quiet. Really did not have an impact on the game. It was a game-time decision going in with the wrist injury, but he ended up playing. And, the Rams did a great job at, because Tua definitely wanted to throw it deep, but the Rams made sure to, keep everything in front of them. There was really no big plays down the field. I mean, he had Jonnu Smith, but that was more of a yards after catch, or that was more of a him doing the work. That was a pass over the middle that he ended up taking down to the 1, but there was no deep shots. That's really what I was trying to say. But yeah, so it was 17-6, and then it was 17-9. Cardi kicked a 53-yard field goal. Then Jason Sanders kicked another field goal. A lot of field goals in the fourth quarter. Rams made it 20-12, and you had 3rd down and 6 from the Rams 34. Rams were able to stop him, but Jason Sanders kicked a 50-yard field goal. And then the Rams on 3rd down on their last drive, they elected to kick the field goal on 3rd down to make it 23-15. They went for the onside kick, and they didn't get it. So the Dolphins ended up winning. Tua on the day, he went 20-28, 207 yards, 1 touchdown and a pick. He also did have the fumble, so a couple of turnovers by him. Only 67 yards on the ground by the Dolphins. Really couldn't get anything going on the ground. The Rams did a nice job at stopping the run in this game. Jalen Waddle, 3 receptions for 57 yards. Had a drop early on in the game that, maybe they could have cashed in and got some more points. Odell Beckham Jr. actually had a clutch catch in this game on another 3rd down. He only had 2 receptions for 17 yards. Tyreek Hill, only 3 receptions for 16 yards and a touchdown. And the Dolphins' defense, 4 sacks in the game. Like I said, the Rams were doing a good job at protecting Matthew Stafford these last few weeks, but not last night. Dolphins' defense showed up. Stafford went 32 for 46, 293 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick. Kyren Williams only 62 yards on the ground. Last couple of weeks, he hasn't really been doing much. But at some point, he's going to break out again. Puka Nacua had 14 targets, 9 receptions for 98 yards. Cooper Kupp, 7 for 80. Davis Allen, the tight end, 5 for 34. Tyler Johnson, 3 for 25. Demarcus Robinson had a catch at the end of the game, the last possession for the Rams to set up the field goal. But yeah, Kyren Williams had a fumble in this game. 3 sacks by the Rams defense. And they dropped to 4-5. The Dolphins improved to 3-6. And look, I still think it's an uphill battle for the Dolphins. I mean, they do have the Raiders and the Patriots coming up, so they could get themselves back to 5-6, and then you get to the hard part of your schedule. But you do have the Jets a couple of times in there, so I expect them to win both of those games the way the Jets are playing, and we'll get to them later in the show. But they do have the Packers, the Texans, the 49ers, and the Browns in Cleveland, which I think they should win that game. But, the Packers, Texans, and 49ers games are going to be tough. And the game is in Cleveland. So, and, I know the Jets are not playing well, but it is a divisional game, so you never know. But, I mean, we saw last year, the Dolphins, they swept them. So, that could happen that could happen again. So, they're not out of it, but again, it's an uphill battle. They basically have to win out. And for the Rams, I mean, that is a crushing loss for them. They do have the Patriots next week, so they can get themselves back on track. But, they got some tough games coming up on the schedule. The Eagles, in New Orleans, and, they're coming off of a win against the Falcons. So who knows how that game could go. You got the Bills at home, the 49ers. You're at the Jets, which I think they should win. Cardinals, I think they could get even with them, and then they got the Seahawks again. So, but you look at the NFC, I mean, it's going to be tough. They got to, get back. They They got to get back on track next week and then go from there. But again, I give the Dolphins a lot of credit. Again, especially their defense. It really showed up. I was surprised by how they played. Because this Rams offense was rolling since they got their guys back. And, to keep them out of the end zone. Now, at one point during the game, Stafford could have hit Kyron Williams for a walk-in touchdown. That was near the goal line, and he missed him. So maybe that could have made a difference in the game. But it just didn't happen. They really just couldn't get anything going. Like I said, the Dolphins' defense was pressuring Stafford all night long, and they couldn't get anything going. So I give them a lot of credit. I didn't see it coming. Now, I mean, it's not overly surprising that they won this game because the Dolphins have a lot of talent on this team. It's just the way the Rams were playing, I thought they would come out with the win. But the Dolphins' offense did struggle after that first drive. I thought it was going to be back and forth, similar to how the game was when the Rams played against the Vikings a couple weeks ago. I thought it was going to be like that, but it never was. It never really got to that point. The Dolphins did just enough offensively to win this game, and the defense, like I said, just kept them out of the end zone. So that's a big win for the Dolphins. For the Rams, that is a tough loss. Let me know what you guys think, though, about this game. What were your takeaways from it? Let me know in the comments. So we are going to take our first break of the show, and then when we come back, we will talk about the Chiefs and their win over the Broncos. A crazy ending to that game. We'll get into that when we come back from our first break. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.